Queen Elizabeth II knew she was destined for the crown ever since she was a young girl. Aside from the fact that she would be next in line for the throne when her father, King George VI, passed away, when Elizabeth's then 6-year-old sister Margaret asked her, "Does this mean that you will have to be the next queen?" Elizabeth, who was 10 at the time, said, "Yes, someday." But to know how Queen Elizabeth II became queen is to know the royal lineage before her. It all started when Elizabeth's grandfather, King George V, became the presumptive heir after his older brother, Prince Albert Victor, died of pneumonia during a flu epidemic. He was only 28 at the time. And on May 6, 1910, George V ascended to the throne. He and his wife, Queen Mary, had 6 children. However, their youngest, Prince John, suffered from severe epileptic seizures and died in his sleep at the age of 13. But we are focusing on George V's eldest, Prince Edward Albert Christian George Andrew Patrick David, who went by David, and his younger brother, Prince Albert Frederick Arthur George. So Albert, or Bertie, as his family called him, married Elizabeth Bowes Lyon in 1923 and became the Duke and Duchess of York. They ended up having 2 girls, Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary and Princess Margaret Rose. However, David, being a bachelor for quite some time, ended up becoming King Edward VIII on January 20th, 1936, when George V died. By that point, David had already fallen in love with Wallis Simpson, the soon-to-be twice-divorced American, and would eventually abdicate the throne to marry Wallis, thus making his brother Albert the next in line to become King George VI. And so all ended up working out the way George V wanted it to, seeing as how Princess Elizabeth was very close to her paternal grandfather. In a November 6, 1935 diary entry, an ailing George V wrote that he had hoped his oldest David wouldn't have an heir, so that the crown would then pass to Albert, and then eventually to Princess Elizabeth. And Princess Elizabeth's childhood went as scheduled until the onset of World War II changed the entire United Kingdom. It wasn't until October 13, 1940 that the princess and heir apparent gave her first radio address from Windsor Castle at the young age of 14. And then by 16, Princess Elizabeth joined the women's branch of the British Army, the Auxiliary Territorial Service, and became 2nd Lieutenant Elizabeth Windsor, vehicle mechanic. This was around the same time a dashing naval officer by the name of Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark won her heart, and the rest was pretty much history. But the two had met way before Elizabeth joined the British Army. They had actually first said hello when she was 13, and it was at that point in her life she became smitten with the then 18-year-old Prince Philip, who, like her, was one of Queen Victoria's great-great-grandchildren. After a very discreet courtship, Philip proposed in 1946 and waited until Elizabeth was 21 to announce the engagement, per George VI's request. And then July 9, 1947, they went public as an engaged couple. Then right before the wedding, George VI bestowed Philip with the titles of Duke of Edinburgh, Earl of Merioneth, Baron Greenwich, and His Royal Highness. George VI had also made his daughter an Order of the Garter, the highest personal honor a monarch can bestow, and he did the same with Philip. Elizabeth and Philip married on November 20th, 1947 at Westminster Abbey. They had a wedding breakfast with only 150 people and honeymooned locally since they didn't want to take a long trip so soon after the war. And soon after, children followed, with their first child, Prince Charles, being born November 14, 1948, Princess Anne in 1950, Prince Andrew in 1960, and Prince Edward in 1964. Knowing that Princess Elizabeth would be his heir, King George VI would advise her about her future job since he sadly knew he wouldn't get the chance to see her carry out the role. In 1951, King George became seriously ill. The King and Queen originally had a 6-month tour to attend, but with his health declining, he had Elizabeth and Philip go in their stead. But before the tour, the couple had planned to stop in Kenya, where they had been gifted a retreat as a wedding present. And when they left on January 31, 1982, King George VI was at the airport to see them off. While the couple enjoyed their time in Kenya, it was there that Princess Elizabeth was notified of her father's death. He had passed away in the early morning of February 6th from a blood clot in the heart. And at the age of 25, Princess Elizabeth was now queen and had to end her trip early to get back to England. Then on February 8th at St. James Palace, Elizabeth appeared before the Accession Council for her proclamation and religious oath, a matter of formality since she had already become queen the moment her father died. She was then formally crowned at her coronation on June 2nd, 1953. And after ascending the throne, Queen Elizabeth II did everything that was required of her the moment she took on the title. In 1965, the Queen stayed busy with her diplomatic duties, including a 10-day visit to the Federal Republic of Germany. Her visit marked the 20-year anniversary of the end of World War II. During a royal tour of Australia and New Zealand in 1970, Queen Elizabeth II had her first walkabout, essentially a casual stroll to greet crowds of people in person instead of waving to them from a distance. This practice is now a regular thing amongst British royals, both abroad and at home. But in 2013, the Queen welcomed a new great-grandson into the fold, Prince George Alexander Louis of Cambridge. Prince George, who is the first child of Prince William and Kate Middleton, is third in the line of succession after his grandfather Prince Charles and his own father. Prince George's birth marked the first time since Queen Victoria's reign that 3 generations of direct heirs to the British throne were alive at the same time. And while the Queen has accomplished a lot during her lifetime, her biggest feat comes from her many years as the reigning British monarch. In 2015, she surpassed her great-great-grandmother Queen Victoria as the longest reigning British monarch in history. Queen Elizabeth II celebrated many royal anniversaries in her time, and since her passing, the Queen still remains a beloved royal figure in the world.